This is a video I legitimately never thought I'd make, and this is not going to be one of those full, like long-winded videos. I'm going to keep this one pretty short by my standards because I haven't had this camera long enough to give like really passionate, in-depth thoughts about it. But I am so pleasantly surprised by the quality, like shockingly surprised by the quality that I've got to at least talk about it a little bit. So first, to back up, I ordered this online, just random local site. This is an Olympus EP3, and I'd never really cared about the pen cameras. I didn't have anything against them, but they just didn't really call out to me. I liked with Micro Four Thirds, I liked the EM5 Mark II that I owned. I was the very first camera I ever bought brand new, and to this day, one of my favorite cameras of all time. I loved that camera. Can't say enough good things about it. I'm going to buy another one at some point. That's a different story. But when I had the EM5 Mark II, I knew a guy who had the EP5, and he let me borrow it, and I actually never even used it when I had it. I held it, and I looked at it. It was the EP5 with the 12 to 40 2.8 Pro, and I thought, and I just kind of set it down. It didn't inspire me to shoot at all. And that's also a lens I don't like, which is a totally different story. But anyway, it wasn't until more recently, this past year, that I became more and more aware of the older pen cameras, more specifically the EP1, and how much of a cult following it has for its really good image quality. And I was really hesitant at first to take it too serious. But there is a YouTuber that I follow. His name is Martin Cassine. I may be mispronouncing that. But he's an English YouTuber, and I don't know if he's a YouTuber or a photographer, but he's a photographer with a YouTube channel. And there are not very many photographers that I follow on YouTube because I simply don't see eye to eye with a lot of them. Nothing against them, but as much as I enjoy cameras and the gear, I don't chase gear for the sake of it. I don't want to upgrade something that doesn't need to be upgraded. I like trying things out, and then after I've tried something out, usually because I've gotten it for a cheap price or a good deal, if I don't love it, I'll just get rid of it. The stuff I keep is the stuff that I love. And too many YouTubers are not speaking my language when it comes to the reason why they get a certain camera or the type of photography they do, their philosophy towards photos. It's more clinical, less artistic. So I don't follow many. But this Martin Cassine guy, the types of photos he was taking really caught my attention. I liked his type of photography and his philosophy towards the way he views cameras and his gear and colors and composing a scene was stuff that I found very, very relatable. So I hit that subscribe button, started watching more of his videos, and it was amazing how often he was saying stuff in a video, and it sounded like I was basically listening to my inner monologue. I was listening to myself through somebody else's mouth, right? Kind of incredible. But he ended up uploading a video about the Olympus EP1, and not only did it make me take it more seriously, but I was seeing the photos he was posting and knowing that he has a similar eye as I do, at least in these circumstances, and the kind of stuff the way he composes things, what he looks for. It really caught my attention. So I started looking around for an EP1, and unfortunately, they're very hard to find. And when you do find one, people now, because there's a cult following, they want way too much money. I eventually did find one, and I've never been burned on a camera. Here in Taiwan, people are really honest about the stuff they have, and if they don't know about something's condition, they'll just tell you outright, I don't know about it. People kind of culturally, they don't want to burn bridges. They don't want to feel like they've done something wrong. So they will highlight every single little flaw, something that you never would have noticed, just so you know it's there, and you won't notice later and feel like they misled you, right? So I've gotten kind of complacent when it comes to buying cameras locally, because if the person selling it says it's good, then I believe it. Yeah, it's good. And for 10 years, that's always been the case. I've never been burned on a camera. Never even heard of somebody who was burned on a camera in Taiwan. But there was a seller online, and he's a local guy. he was saying, he had an EP1 with the Olympus 17 millimeter f2.8, and didn't really care about that lens, but I'm willing to try it out. And he for the set, he wanted, I think it's equivalent to around 80 or 90 US dollars. He was saying, oh, there's signs of use, but everything works. It's been tested. So I thought, fair enough. He doesn't have very many photos. He's not giving a lot of information, but he says it's good, so I'll get it. And when I got it, it was a catastrophe. There was visible, like I took the lens off. There was very visible, like I've never seen this on any camera, even photos online. There's an insane amount of visible fungus on the sensor itself, like spider webs crawling across it. It was insane. I held the lens up to the light and it was full of mildew and everything else. I tried turning the camera on, it turned on, but basically all the buttons weren't responsive. You could hit and click whatever you wanted and nothing happened. It was a train wreck of a camera. I contacted him. Turns out he was an old man. He didn't really know. And as soon as I told him the issues, he gave me a refund. It was no problem. But it bummed me out, and I thought, man, I'm never going to find a good EP1. But I started, as I was researching more and more and more, I found people saying that it's actually any of those early cameras. The EP2, the EP3, those 12 megapixel pens, they all have very similar image quality. Some people say the same, some people say it's slightly different, but those are all good. And I came across this, an EP3. And the guy said basically everything works fine. It's just that there's an issue where it will drain the battery as long as the battery stays in. So if you don't want it to drain the battery dead, you have to take the battery out when you're not using it. And that's true. So I thought I wouldn't mind. Maybe I could get it fixed. I've never actually had to have a camera repaired before, but as I went to these different camera repair shops and tried to get it repaired, I was finding out very quickly that nobody even offers to repair this thing. They say it's too old, the parts are hard to find, we don't want to mess with that. And as it turns out, I didn't think it would be a big issue, but for the type of photography I find myself doing, which is very casual, kind of candid stuff, no real time to set up anything, having a camera with no battery in it and having to have the battery separate and then see a scene and trying to take the camera out and open the little door and put the battery in and shut the door and turn it on and oh man, everything's been reset, so I gotta, oh crap, the scene's gone. So the result has been I haven't really used this thing because it's not convenient to use. But because of how algorithms work, because I've been searching for so much Micro Four Thirds gear, trying to find an EP1 and eventually an EP3, I came across a post that somebody up in Taipei had posted on Facebook Marketplace, and he was saying he was selling an Olympus GX1, which I've heard about. I don't know much about him, but I know there's kind of a cult following. I know some people who shoot them, and they will make posts every once in a while on Instagram saying like it's still the best camera for street. And I never took it seriously because I'm not really a fan of Panasonic cameras, which is a different story. But the guy was saying he was selling a Panasonic GX1. He was also selling the 14mm f2.5, I believe it is, and the 20mm f1.7. And I'm interested in the 20mm f1.7 because that's a notoriously good lens, very sharp. And he just had the price listed as $125. And typically that's, again, very common in Taiwan. If somebody's posting on Marketplace or they're selling multiple items, they'll typically, the price they put will be the price of a single item, typically the cheapest item, so that you'll click on the ad. And then when you get in there, they'll have the breakdown of, okay, well, this is the individual price for every individual thing. It's common. So I messaged him. I said, hey, I'm interested in the 20mm f1.7. How much is it? And he said, oh, I don't sell it separately. It has to be bought with everything. I said, okay, well, I don't really need the GX1 or the 14mm, but then I thought quickly in my head, if it's cheap, I guess I could sell them, whatever. Let me do the math and see if it's worth the trouble. So, okay, how much do you want for everything? And he said, the price is listed. I said, no, the price just says $125. And he said, yes, it's $125. and I'm still, it's not quite clicking because it seems impossibly cheap. So I confirmed, are you telling me that it's Panasonic GX1 and the 14 millimeter f2.5 and the 20 millimeter f1.7 all together for a combined total of $125? He said, yes. I said, what's wrong with it? He said, nothing, it works fine. I'm like, okay, so there's no issue. Like I was actually becoming very suspicious because I was, kind of burned on the Olympus EP1. And the short version, because I don't want to talk about this too much, is that he's an old man up in Type A, and he bought this one right here, his Panasonic GX1, brand new out of the camera shop. And being an old man, he took very good care of it. No marks, no scratches, no dents, no dings. It's immaculate. And he had all of this great stuff for it. He had not only the lenses, but he had the original lens boxes that they came in when he bought them separately. He had the camera box. He had all the original plastic that covered all the stuff. He had bought these nice German-made UV filters for each of the lenses. He had various straps for the cameras, or for the camera, straps plural for the camera singular. He had also purchased an entire separate book, which I think is up on the shelf over there, but it's a book all about just the GX1. It's one of those kind of, like those photography books you used to buy about a single camera. I've seen them for a whole photography book just for the D700 and everything you can know about it. Well, he had one for the GX1 and everything was in immaculate condition. So of course, I drove all the way to Type A. I saw this stuff. I couldn't believe it. And it's $125. And he's like, oh yeah. So I gave him the money and then he wanted to show me how to use it. And of course, I think this is very sweet of him. He's a nice old guy. He assumes I don't know anything about cameras and he wants to show me how to use the stuff. So I'm like, yes, absolutely. I would love for you to take the time to show me. Thank you. And we shook hands, walked away very happy. And then I was at a kind of a crossroads because I've owned several Panasonic cameras. I don't think there's anything wrong with them as far as build quality goes. I've had the G7, I had the G9, I've had several others I can't remember off the top of my head, but I've had multiple Panasonic cameras. I think from a technical image quality standpoint, they're good. I think from a build quality standpoint, they're good. I have nothing against the company itself. I think it's a good company that makes good products. But I don't really like the rendering. I remember when I had my G7, I would take so many photos with it, and it was a very convenient camera. I liked using it, but I never really liked the rendering of the photos. And it's one of those things that you can't put your finger on. I don't know why I didn't like it. It's just, when I talked about my 5D Classic, I said that it has a warmth to it, right? When I talk about my Canon 6D, the idea is that they're just perfect. Like right out of the camera, it's so foolproof. Right out of the camera, everything looks great, right? Every camera has a certain look, and certain ones have a certain special look. And I loved the image quality out of my Nikon D3S. I still have my Nikon D200 over here, old CCD sensor, because I like the way it renders. I love the image quality, the look of the photos from my EM5 Mark II. So much, in fact, that I shot JPEG a lot on that camera, which is something I rarely do, but it worked well with that camera. But what I'm getting at was when I looked at the photos from my G7, there was just something about it that left something to be desired. I just seems like they have no soul, if that makes sense. And later when I had my G9, I loved the G9. God, I love that camera. I had a lot of really nice of the Leica branded lenses for it, and I did a lot of stuff with that camera. And I found myself, though, in the end, primarily using it for video more than anything else, just because it had great video features. But I very rarely used it for photography. It wasn't as bad as the G7 as far as lack of soul, but there wasn't that straight out of camera foolproof beauty to the photos either. You had to work for it a little bit. So it was just in my mind that, okay, Panasonic does great stuff with video, but For photos, it's not quite there. I prefer the look of the photos from Olympus cameras for Micro Four Thirds stuff, right? So that's what I basically decided. That just must be what it is. So when it came to this camera, I thought, man, this isn't. It's a smaller camera, so not great ergonomics. It's not bad. Its little grip is actually surprisingly good, but I just thought when I look at this camera, it doesn't look attractive. I don't like this kind of purplish gray color that it has. I don't like the design of the camera. It's ugly to look at. It just seems very clunky. Like there's nothing about this aesthetically that draws me in, which is a bit disappointing. Because it's a Micro Four Thirds camera from a company that I don't like the image quality from, typically like Panasonic, and it's also not a flagship camera. It was a compact, like a compact little mirrorless camera meant for street photography, and it was also from, I think this came out in 2012 maybe. Maybe I should check that, but I just thought this has a lot of stuff stacked against it. I'm not gonna like this. It's probably gonna be slow and clunky. I had really, really low expectations. But I do what I always do. I give it a shot. And I put this... First, I tried actually the other lens it came with, which was this 14-2.5. And before I talk about the camera, I will say that I'm actually shocked at how much I like this lens. This 14-2.5 is so minuscule. It is just so itty-bitty. Even for pancake lenses, like... We know the 21.7 is a small lens, and you probably can't see it from all the way over there, but this is even smaller and shallower than the 21.7. Everything about it is just so little. It's like a toy. But when I shot with this, I really liked it. And I think what's happened, to be honest, because I never really liked the 28mm focal length. I don't hate it, but I don't like it as much as a 35. 35 is my favorite. I think what's happened is that over the years, we all have cameras on our phones, and the default camera on all these phones is typically 28mm focal length equivalent. And I think what has happened is that all of us have gotten used to framing in 28mm and taking photos in 28mm and seeing photos in 28mm. So without thinking about it subconsciously, we've become very familiar with 28mm and very comfortable with it, because I have never gone out of my way to intentionally buy a 28mm focal length lens, but I ended up with one in this, and I found that I actually liked using it quite a bit. It didn't become an instant favorite, but I was shockingly surprised at how useful and versatile it was. And I mean, yeah, I can't say a lot more than that. Just I thought this would be the first thing I'd post for sale, and I'm actually going to hang on to it. It's actually a surprisingly useful and fun little lens to use. That even if you don't think you're going to use it, you can throw it in your pocket and you'll forget that it's there. It's just so small. But the real thing I wanted to talk about was the camera. This camera, I put the 21.7 because I know I like this lens. The very first night I used this camera, it was me and my family, my wife, my 2 children, my boys. We went to the outlet mall, which is right on the ocean, right at the harbor. And we typically go there. We'll get some sushi to eat. We'll do a little window shopping, whatever, just hang out. And it was nighttime, so all the lights were lit up. The Ferris wheel was lit up, very low light. And I just kind of had this hanging on my side. And I thought if I see anything interesting, I'll take photos, like I always do, just kind of casual, candid stuff. And again, I had such low expectations. I thought, I won't like the rendering, even if I get a good shot that I like. Again, not only would I not like the rendering, but the low light's probably going to be terrible. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And the very first photo I took was of my youngest child, Wyatt. He was sitting on what's basically a bench made of pallets, and it has like some shade above it, like these little tassels that hang for shade. But he had climbed up on that, and he was sitting on that, and he was kind of rolling around and sitting up and playing with the tassels. And at one point he laid back, and I just held the camera out, because it's another thing, I love viewfinders, so composing to a screen is something I don't like. But went ahead and held the camera out, achieved focus instantaneously. I was immediately shocked, like, oh wow. Like I thought there must have been a mistake where it had defaulted to minimum focus or something. It focused so immediately that I did not believe it was actually in focus. I thought, no. Older camera, contrast detect autofocus, and we're in low light. There's no way this actually got focus. And I kept hitting the button, like different parts, like put it on his face, put it on his eye, put it on his chin, put it on the collar of his shirt where there's some contrast. I kept trying to recompose and get focus, and every single time it was just instantaneous. I didn't have to wait at all. It just was locking immediately. So after a few seconds, I said, whatever, and I took the photo. And I never chimp either, but I was so curious that I actually stopped and I pushed a little playback button, and I was glued to the screen like, oh, like this, at least on this tiny little screen, like this looks good. Whoa, like I can still remember very clearly how blown away I was. Just, whoa, like, I can't believe how good this looks. It's not that the photo was amazing, but man, you walk into something with such low expectations and you're thinking of all the things that you just know you're going to have to work around. You just know you're going to have to fix some editing or something. And then, wow, this looks good. So the image looked so clean. Not saying from a clinical point that I zoomed in 1,000% and it was grain free. There's probably some noise in there, but you know me, I don't really care about noise. I just expected there to be quite a bit. And to my surprise, to glance at it, I didn't notice any initially. So I thought, oh, did somehow, because this has a nice wide aperture and something reasons and so forth, did this somehow end up maintaining a low ISO? Is that what happened? And I checked the ISO, and no, the ISO was actually kind of cranked up a little bit, but it just held together. It actually maintained a pretty clean photo. So I started taking a few more photos of him on that little bench and surprised by them. And then I was excited. After that, I was actually excited. Like, I'm actually going to start taking this with me when the light is good, when I go out of the house. Like, this is going to be my new carry everywhere camera, my weekend camera, my after work camera. Like, I'm going to kind of see what I can come up with. So over the past couple months, if I've grabbed a camera randomly, most of the time it's been this one. And most of the time it's had this 20mm lens on it, which I also have this Olympus 12mm f2, fantastic lens, but I can't explain. I can't give you a good technical reason, but for some reason I just don't really like using it on this camera. It just doesn't feel right. And it's not a brand thing. I don't care that this is Olympus and this is Panasonic. It's just, I don't know. Something about this camera lends itself very well to the 40mm field of view, that 35, 40mm kind of range. And I love a wider angle, like a 24mm, but it doesn't feel right to use that angle of view with this camera, if that makes sense. But anyway, I started taking this camera with me everywhere and just taking random photos. Again, nothing's set up, nothing's made to look a certain way. It's just kind of random, casual, candid photos. And I found, to my great surprise and relief and satisfaction, that every single photo that comes out of this camera looks great. And I cannot stress enough, I am not a Panasonic fanboy. I don't even like Panasonic cameras when it comes to rendering for images. For video, they're great, but for photos, I don't even like Panasonic cameras. I am not one of these guys is jumping on that GX1 bandwagon like, oh, everybody says this is a great street camera, therefore it's great. Like, that's not what this is. I'm not trying to talk you into buying one, but I have to tell you, I should not like this camera. Based on all of my experience with Panasonic cameras, these style of cameras, various little things and reasons and all that, I didn't expect to like it and I shouldn't like it, but it turns out I am loving this camera. It just can't miss. The only thing I thought was bad about it was the battery life. I noticed the battery was draining pretty fast and I thought, oh, there's the gotcha. these older cameras, smaller body, smaller batteries, they're not very efficient. That kind of sucks. That's why I like DSLRs, bigger batteries. I can shoot forever. And then it occurred to me, okay, with poor battery life, I should order a second battery. And I ordered one. It got here. I paid like $10 for it. I don't even know what brand it is. It's not a Panasonic battery. It's just some generic replacement. But it turns out the bad battery life is just because the one that came with it is the original battery. So it's degraded over the years. Because when I put this replacement battery in it, the brand new battery, this thing goes forever. Like doing my typical style of photography, where I'll turn on the camera, take a photo of something I like, and then turn it off, put it away, or let it go to sleep and put it away. I can have this with one battery in it for weeks at a time. As a matter of fact, I think the last time I put a fully charged battery in here was probably a month ago. And I'll take it out every time I want to take a random photo. I'm using this camera. And if I turn it on right now, it is showing me that I still have 3 bars. It's still showing full battery. It hasn't dropped at all as far as the indicator goes. So turns out if you have a fresh battery, it's actually really good on battery too. So the grip makes it really easy to hang on to. The little flip switch for on and off is right here. So I use my index finger. I'm not going to stand up, but if I'm walking and I have the camera hanging at my side as I'm just kind of walking and swinging my arms back and forth, if I see something I like or I'm approaching something, I don't want to draw attention to myself, I just take that index finger that is ready to hit the shutter and I go right over there and I flip it to the on. And when I'm done, I lift it and I take the photo and then it just flips back off. So that same shutter finger can just flip it on and flip it off. It doesn't look like it would be an intuitive on-off switch, but it turns out that it's maybe one of the most intuitive, most useful locations for an on-off switch. So the ergonomics are good. It turns out in use, the ergonomics are good. It has a touch screen, which I very rarely use, but sometimes it is very useful that it actually has a functioning, usable touch screen. The autofocus is basically instantaneous. The low light performance is shockingly good. The rendering is beautiful in my opinion. I love the way it renders. It takes very, very minimal editing, which again, if you know from my other videos, I am a fan of not having to spend time at the computer and edit. Like everything about this camera is just so satisfying and so shockingly good. And now I of course immediately understand why it has such a cult following, why so many people who have owned it for years will still brag about it and still say it's such a great camera. And then I'm also simultaneously feel like I'm in a real bad position because I now know how good this camera is and I know how good the images are and I know how easy it is to use and I know all the great things about it. But I also know that just 6 months ago, for example, I had zero interest in this camera. I would have never paid money for this camera. I only bought it with the intent to sell it because I was getting such a great deal on as a kit. Like basically, I was spending the money you would on just the lens. Like that's all I cared about was just the lens. And for the price that I could have paid for just the lens used, I got everything. So I only got the camera because it was essentially free. I never would have paid for the camera. Like you could not have convinced me that I would have liked this camera. I understand if you're in that mindset. I understand because I was that guy a few months ago. So now I'm putting myself in your position. If I was watching this video as a third party and I heard myself saying how great this camera is, I wouldn't believe it. I would be convinced that I was just trying to make a video for the sake of a video and that it's probably crap, but I promise you it's really good. It's really good. Which then also makes me scratch my head and wonder, like, what happened? Because I've had newer, more expensive nicer, higher end Panasonic cameras over the years that on paper should be beating this. And spec wise, they do, but image quality, like again, rendering, like what you like to see, not lab stuff, but real world use, image quality wise, like they're not as good as this. How is it that I had a big, expensive, nice Panasonic G9 with Leica branded lenses, and those photos sucked in comparison to this little free camera that I got because it was attached to this lens that I wanted to buy? Like, what are the odds of that? So anyway, I'm gonna keep rambling, and this is gonna accidentally turn into an hour-long video if I don't shut myself up. That's all I wanted to say. I wanted to let you guys know that right now, cameras are weird. The used market's going crazy. Prices are fluctuating a lot. And anytime there's a popular camera, even if it honestly sucks, if it somehow gains some generic popularity, the prices skyrocket. I'm not saying you need to find this camera and you have to buy it, because again, I wouldn't have. Like, I did not intend to ever pay money for this camera. But I can also assure you that if, like me, you accidentally come across a good deal, like you just so happen to stumble across this camera and it's not outrageously priced, maybe consider buying it, because it is shockingly good. Like, shockingly good. I was shocked at how good it is. I'm still, as I sit here making this video, looking at this camera, thinking about some of my favorite photos that I've taken with it, I'm still in disbelief that I took those photos with this camera. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Here, over a decade later, in 2023, the Panasonic Lumix GX1, little compact street camera, with any lens, I'm assuming, but in this case with the 20mm f1.7 or even the 14-2.5, is a baller of a camera. It's really good. I highly recommend it. It's awesome. And you don't have to work for it to be awesome. Like, just straight out of camera. These are great photos. But I didn't shoot JPEG. I'm just gonna, I gotta throw that out there real fast. I have not even tried JPEG on this camera, so I have no idea what those are like. These are all raw, edited in Lightroom, but it's great. Anyway, I'm gonna shut myself up. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and I don't know. I guess I'll talk to you again next time.